Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a stack of sources that seem, well, completely unrelated on the surface.
They really do.
On one hand, we've got the sociology of personal debt, how we think about money. And on the other, we're looking at the absolute boundaries of pure mathematical logic.
Yeah, pretty different fields.
But we're going to use them to explore this single massive question. What are the fundamental limits? The limits of governance and the limits of reason itself.
It's a fascinating pairing, actually. Our sources really force us to confront two very different kinds of boundaries. We're looking at how far society can push the limits of financial ignorance onto you, the individual.
Right, this demand that you become like the master of your own complex financial life.
Exactly. And then almost in complete contrast, we turn to the universe of pure facts, mathematics.
And what do we find there?
We find that even the most rigorous system humans have ever created has limits. You can't push back. There are truths out there that exist, but that reason itself can never fully prove or explain. Wow.
Okay.
So our mission today really is to trace these two boundaries, these divergent lines. We want to understand this modern idea of the entrepreneurial self.
That's you, the listener, right?
Yeah.
Constantly managing risk, calculating everything.
That's the idea. We want to compare that demand with the absolute unyielding mathematical proof that some facts in the universe are just irreducibly random. They just are.
Okay, so where does this deep dive begin? You mentioned a pivot point.
It really kicks off with a critical moment in recent history, the global financial crisis of 2008.
Right. Big one.
Huge. Before that, if you were heavily in debt or if your personal finances collapsed, well, that was mostly seen as your problem, a private failing.
Bad luck, bad choices, something like that.
Pretty much. But the crisis completely changed the architecture of responsibility. In the aftermath, suddenly improving the financial literacy of the ordinary citizen consumer, that just rocketed to the top of the global agenda.
For regulators, for government.
Absolutely. Regulators, financial institutions, international bodies. It became a public problem, something demanding state-level intervention.
And what was the logic there? Why the sudden focus on individual literacy?
The logic was powerful, actually, almost elegant in its simplicity, you could say.
Yeah.
The idea was financially capable individuals wouldn't just improve their own lives, right? They would stabilize the entire system.
Ah, so my budgeting skills suddenly impact Wall Street.
That was the argument. Governing the entrepreneurial self suddenly became the main way, the key mechanism for ensuring the collective financial health of the nation-state, even the global market. Your personal budget became, well, geopolitical strategy.
That's quite a leap.
It is, and that's where we need to start. Let's unpack that collective project, trace how those limits of ignorance were systematically pushed onto the consumer.
Okay, part one. Let's frame the core question here based on the source material. It seems to be about how these massive corporations, we're talking banks, credit card companies, global finance bodies, how do they manage to mobilize ordinary citizens?
Yeah. Mobilize them in a specific way.
Exactly. By offering products, services, things that basically assume they're going to transform your relationship with yourself.
Right. Along very specific ethical and political lines. It's not just about selling you a mortgage anymore.
No, it's about shaping who you are as a financial citizen.
We're looking at a system that cleverly leverages consumption. Your choice to use a specific credit card or take out a particular loan, it uses that as a kind of proxy for civic virtue. Are you being a good, responsible citizen? Check your spending habit.
And this idea didn't just pop up after 2008, did it?
Oh, no, it has roots. The initial focus, historically speaking, was different. Back in the 1910s, 1920s, the main push for financial guidance was really aimed at investor education.
Okay, people buying stocks.
Exactly. It came out of the rise of mass consumption and, frankly, the need to protect people entering the market for the first time, protecting them from scams, from, irrational exuberance, especially after the big crash in 1929.
So the goal was protectionist, initially. Teaching the small investor how to survive, how to navigate these new, maybe dangerous markets they were being pulled into.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But the source material highlights this really crucial shift happening around the early 2000s.
What changed?
The language changed. The term investor, which, implies having capital, taking risks, looking for returns, that term started getting steadily replaced in the discourse.
By what?
By the term consumer. And that wasn't just semantics. It signaled a shift Financial engagement wasn't primarily about maximizing your returns anymore. It became about responsible household consumption, managing debt, being a good consumer.
And this lines up with financial ignorance becoming a political problem.
Directly. This is where financial ignorance gets officially framed as a political challenge. And the place where this global problematization really took shape was the OECD.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They established their financial education project back in 2003. And, this project didn't just appear out of thin air. It was a response.
To what? What was driving it?
It was driven by these really powerful demographic and market shifts that were already putting a huge strain on national budgets, on social safety nets.
Can you give us specifics? What were those drivers the OECD identified?
They pointed to three main forces. First, aging populations. Huge pressure on state pensions, corporate pensions. It basically forced individuals to figure out their own retirement savings.
Okay, the decline of guaranteed pensions.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Second, much easier access to credit. Mortgages, credit cards, loans, but often complex ones. This was leading to massive personal debt burdens for a lot of people.
Right. More debt, easier to get into trouble.
And third, increased personal income, relatively speaking, especially for middle and upper classes. This meant more people had money that needed, supposedly, more sophisticated decisions about investing and saving.
So putting it together, the average person was getting tangled up in more complex financial markets.
Right.
And at the same time, the consequences, if they messed up, were becoming much more severe.
Exactly that. The problem was really double-sided. Market complexity was going up, but the individual's ignorance, or maybe just their inability to cope with all that complexity, that was starting to look like a systemic risk, a risk to the whole economy.
Okay, so it's a risk. How did the OECD propose to solve it? You said their definition was key.
Absolutely key. Because their 2005 definition of financial education, well, on the surface, it aimed at improving individual financial well-being.
That's good. Helping people.
That's the individual benefit, the part they emphasized first. But immediately after that, they listed the societal benefits.
Ah, here it comes.
Right. They explicitly stated that this individual improvement contributes to things like market efficiency, enhanced competition, economic growth. And here's the kicker: lower levels of regulatory intervention.
Whoa, hold on. Let me make sure I heard that right. They actually linked individual financial literacy to less regulation.
That's the core argument being made.
So the message was basically, if you all learn to budget better and manage your debt, we, the regulators, won't have to step in so much to fix market messes or protect you.
That is precisely the linkage they established. Financial illiteracy wasn't just a personal tragedy anymore. It was framed as a problem of national interest, a drag on the economy. And that framing justified political intervention.
But not intervention to control the markets necessarily.
No, intervention to control citizens, to shape their behavior. It discursively linked your success with your household budget directly to the smooth, effective functioning of the entire market economy.
That completely reframes the purpose of governance, doesn't it? It brings us right to this sociological idea of governmentality. We should probably unpack that a bit, try to keep it clear for everyone listening.
Yeah, it's a useful concept, though the term itself is a bit academic. Governmentality essentially gives us a lens to understand how modern power works. It's not just about the state bossing you around with laws.
Right. It's more subtle.
Much more subtle. It's what the philosopher Foucault called the way in which one conducts the conduct of men. Think of it as all the subtle techniques and strategies used to shape your choices, your self-perception, connecting your private behavior, your ethics, to public goals, to politics.
Okay, give me an example, like public health.
Perfect example. If the state wants to lower obesity rates, it doesn't usually pass a law forcing you to eat broccoli, right?
Probably not.
Instead, it runs public health campaigns, maybe it puts a tax on sugary drinks, it promotes fitness apps, and it creates this kind of moral discourse where choosing junk food starts to feel like a personal failing, a lack of self-control.
So my private health choice becomes what you called an etho-political concern. It's both about my ethics and state politics.
Exactly. That's the linkage. And when you apply the same logic to finance, the mechanism gets a specific name: responsibilization.
Responsibilization.
Yeah.
Making people responsible.
It's the modern way of doing self-government. External entities, whether it's the state or increasingly financial corporations, push the burden of dealing with complex choices onto you, the individual.
And that's how we become the entrepreneurial self.
That's the term, yeah. You're no longer just a citizen expecting a stable system to support you. You're reimagined as an entrepreneur of your own life. You have to constantly calculate the risks.
Risks of everything. My job, my health, my education, saving for retirement.
All of it. You become the actuary of your own future. You have to manage your personal risk portfolio.
And if you fail,
Yeah.
if you lose your job or can't afford retirement.
Well, the system increasingly says, tough luck. You didn't manage your risks properly. You didn't make the right entrepreneurial choices.
Wow. Okay, but this whole framework, it seems like it would run into problems. The sources mention something called the exclusion paradox.
Yes, and it's a fascinating, almost tragic flaw in the whole setup.
What is this paradox exactly?
It comes straight from the OECD's own findings. They noted, quite logically, that for financial education to actually work, the individual has to be receptive. They have to be motivated to learn and change their behavior, right?
Makes sense. You can lead a horse to water.
Exactly. But then they looked at the survey data on financial literacy levels. And what did they find?
Let me guess. The lowest levels weren't random.
Not at all. They correlated very strongly with a social bias. Low literacy was concentrated in populations with limited formal education, marginalized communities, people facing structural economic hurdles.
So the very people who theoretically need this financial education the most.
Precisely. And these were often the same groups who were most reluctant, maybe suspicious, or just unwilling to engage with these top-down, paternalistic educational programs.
Especially if those programs were coming from institutions they already mistrusted, or maybe even blamed for their problems.
You got it. So the system immediately creates this deep boundary, this split.
How does that split work?
Well, if you're motivated, receptive, willing to play the game of the entrepreneurial self, you get offered financial education. These are the tools for self-responsibilization, for inclusion in the market.
Okay, path one. What of the others, the ones who are unwilling or maybe unable?
They get relegated to a different category, consumer protection.
Protection, that sounds good.
But it's protection from the consequences of the choices they supposedly couldn't or wouldn't govern themselves. It's a passive category. You're protected because you're deemed incapable of self-protection.
Ah, I see the shift. It subtly changes the moral judgment.
Dramatically. It shifts the limit of acceptable ignorance. It moves from, oh, he didn't know any better, which implies innocence, maybe a need for care, to he should have known better, which implies a moral failing, a failure of self-management, of self-protection. The zone of acceptable ignorance just shrinks and shrinks.
And this whole process, this pushing of responsibility, you called it corporate governmentalization.
Yes, because increasingly it's corporations, not just the state, driving this, and they send this really complex, almost contradictory double message.
Okay, what's the double message? It sounds confusing already.
It is. The first part of the message is actually an acknowledgement of complexity. The big institutions, the banks, they know that your financial health isn't simple. It can't be boiled down to a few universal rules.
Because it depends on so many other things.
Exactly. Your job security, your family situation, your health, where you live. All these non-financial factors are deeply intertwined. They acknowledge that the complexity is immense.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on that a little. When a giant corporation or an international body says, oh, the system is just too complex for general rule, isn't that just a really sophisticated way for them to dodge liability?
That's a really important point.
Like saying, it's too complicated, so don't blame us if our advice or lack of advice doesn't work out for your specific complex situation. It sounds like self-protection for them.
Look. Self-exoneration is definitely a consequence, no doubt about it. But the source material argues the mechanism itself is fundamentally governmental. By emphasizing the infinite complexity, they achieve something else.
What's that?
They successfully shift the entire burden of finding the single right answer onto you. If the rules are too complex for them to give you a general norm, well then you, the individual, must become the highly specialized expert governor of your own unique life context.
So because it's so complex, you have to figure it out alone.
Precisely. That's the real power shift. So the overall injunction, the paradoxical communication becomes, look, you absolutely have to behave in a financially responsible way.
Okay, that part's clear. Obligation.
But, and here's the twist, it is entirely up to you to decide what financially responsible actually means for you based on your particular, unique, infinitely complex life situation.
Wow. That's the ultimate privatization of risk and responsibility, isn't it?
It really is. And this is where we see this concept of power at a distance really play out. It's enacted through corporate technology. The source provides a great case study looking at Visa's educational website, manageyourmoney.com.
Okay, so we're shifting focus now from big policy ideas to how a specific company, a credit card company, actually implements this control.
Exactly. How do they execute this governmental strategy?
How does the website do it?
The Visa website acts as what the source calls a technology of subjectivation. It's designed to shape the subject, the consumer. It's the specific point of contact where your desire for self-management meets the political and financial ordering of the market.
And how do they hook you in? What's the first step?
The most effective initial tool they use is a metaphor: financial fitness.
Ah, like physical fitness. That's instantly relatable, isn't it? We all have some level of physical fitness, good, bad, could be better.
Exactly. So they apply the same logic to money. Everyone has a state of financial fitness. The only question is whether yours needs improvement.
And that framing is kind of inescapable. You can't really say, I don't have financial fitness.
Right. It immediately pulls you into this Foucaultian idea of the caring of the self. You now feel this obligation to constantly supervise, monitor, develop your financial state, just like you might track your steps or watch your diet.
So if you're financially unfed, the implication is, what? You've been lazy.
Negligent.
Like it implies a lack of vigilance, yeah. A lack of proper self-care. It's subtly pathologizes financial difficulty as a personal failing of self-management.
And this fitness frame allows the site to then promote certain behaviors as virtues, right?
Yeah.
Budgeting, saving.
Exactly. Budgeting, saving wisely, controlling spending. These aren't just presented as smart habits. They're framed as moral imperatives, essential components of being fit.
It sounds like it taps into older ideas about self-control, maybe even stoicism.
Very much so.
Oh.
The source explicitly mentions the Stoicist argument. True freedom, in this view, isn't found in satisfying all your desires, because that can lead to compulsive buying, debt spirals.
Right. Instead, freedom comes from mastering or controlling those desires. So, unreflective spending, impulsive buying, that gets framed as morally unfit. A dangerous lack of self-control that threatens your standing, your citizenship in the financial world.
And they don't just leave it at managing debt, do they? They raise the stakes much higher.
Immediately. They connect seemingly small, mundane financial facts like, did you check your credit report? Did you pay that bill on time? They link those directly to major life events.
Like what?
Things like qualifying for a mortgage to buy a home, being able to rent a decent apartment, getting affordable car insurance, sometimes even getting hired for certain jobs.
So the message becomes incredibly clear. Your day-to-day financial self-management isn't just about money. It's the fundamental key to navigating, well, everything. The ordinary business of life, as the source puts it.
Fail here, and the implication is you fail everywhere else. Your financial fitness determines your life chances.
And the analysis in the source points out this massive scope creep in what counts as finance. It goes way beyond just loans and credit scores.
Oh, absolutely. The site doesn't just cover mortgages and budgeting. It covers the entire lifespan. Planning for parenthood, saving for college, managing finances during retirement, even dealing with elder care costs.
Wow.
And it even pulls in topics that seem only indirectly related to finance.
That's where the corporate governmentalization really shows itself, isn't it? When they start linking non-financial things back to money.
Precisely. The sources highlight this specific equivalence chain they build between taking care of your physical health and your financial management.
How does that work?
They argue, for example, that being physically fit saves you money on health insurance premiums. It means fewer sick days from work, which makes you a more valuable, more stable employee.
Which in turn enhances your financial fitness, your creditworthiness.
You see the loop.
Yeah.
And the specific tips they offered on the site were really quite remarkable in how far they reach into personal life.
Like what? Give us an example.
The source mentions the site actually suggesting using old laundry detergent containers filled with sand as homemade fitness weights.
Seriously, on a financial website.
Seriously. Or promoting buying organic produce at a local farmer's market, framing it not just as healthy eating, but as a financially savvy move, potentially saving money long term.
It feels like a colonization of the private sphere. Every little decision you make about your health, your groceries, your exercise, it gets recoded as a financial decision with implications for your fitness score.
That's a very good way to put it. And the ultimate goal, according to the source's analysis, it's to define financial literacy in terms that align perfectly with what they need. Factors that signal financial credibility.
Meaning your eligibility for the products they sell. Credit cards, loans, mortgages.
Exactly. Are you a good risk? Are you likely to repay? Financial literacy becomes synonymous with being creditworthy, with being a reliable customer for financial services.
Okay, so wrapping up part one. We see the limits of ignorance aren't fixed. They're actively manipulated, pushed onto the individual by political and corporate forces. You're made permanently responsible for governing the immense complexity of your own life.
Yeah, you're constantly urged to compress all the chaos and uncertainty of life into a neat, manageable, rational plan. A budget. A forecast.
Which, ironically, sets up the perfect contrast for part two. Because there, we turn to a domain where complexity is absolutely not governable in that way.
Precisely. We move from the demand for personal compression to the reality of irreducible complexity in the mathematical universe.
Okay, part two. For centuries, mathematics was kind of driven by this deep philosophical faith, wasn't it? This belief that ultimately everything was provable. You just needed enough time, enough brain power, enough rigor.
Absolutely. It was a core belief. And that faith really reached its peak with the ambitions of David Hilbert, the great mathematician, in the early 20th century.
What was Hilbert's dream?
Hilbert believed, or at least hoped, that a theory of everything was possible for mathematics. He envisioned finding a finite, complete set of basic principles, axioms.
Like the fundamental building blocks.
Exactly. Foundational axioms from which every single mathematical truth, no matter how complex, could be logically deduced through purely mechanical symbolic steps, like a giant, flawless proof machine.
The ultimate dream of total rational completeness. No gaps, no uncertainties.
That was the goal. But of course, that dream was famously shattered.
By Kurt Gödel, right, in the 1930s.
By Gödel, yes. His incompleteness theorems were revolutionary. He proved that within any sufficiently complex formal system like arithmetic, the math we use every day, there must exist statements that are true.
True facts about numbers.
But that cannot be formally proven using only the rules and axioms of that system itself.
How did he even show that? It sounds paradoxical.
He used incredibly ingenious self-referential paradoxes. Essentially, he constructed a mathematical statement that, through a clever encoding, effectively said, this statement is unprovable within this system.
Like the old liar paradox. This sentence is false.
Kind of like that, but rigorously embedded within mathematical logic. If the statement was provable, it would mean it's false, because it claims to be unprovable, leading to a contradiction. If it was unprovable, then it would be true, meaning there's a true statement the system can't prove.
Wow. Okay, so Gödel established the first major limit of reason within mathematics. Some truths are just logically out of reach for any given finite set of rules.
He did. But our sources suggest that, as profound as Gödel's discovery was, it was really just the beginning of the problem.
Right.
Mathematically speaking, it was just the tip of the iceberg.
How so? What came next?
What came next, particularly in the latter half of the 20th century, was the development of algorithmic information theory, or AIT.
Okay.
And AIT moves beyond just theoretical incompleteness, the idea that some things are unprovable. It confronts a deeper, maybe even more profound limit. The limit of algorithmic complexity or irreducible randomness.
And this idea of complexity, it actually has much older roots, doesn't it? Before computers.
Oh, definitely. You can trace the core idea back centuries. The source highlights Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz way back in 1686.
Leibniz, the philosopher and mathematician.
The very same. Leibniz had this incredibly insightful philosophical point. He suggested that for any scientific theory to actually be meaningful, to count as an explanation, it must be simpler than the data it's trying to explain.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense. If your theory is just as complicated as the observations.
Then you haven't really explained anything, have you? You've just kind of re-described the data in a different language. You haven't found an underlying pattern or law.
So what did Leibniz conclude from that?
He realized that if the simplest possible law you can find to describe a set of data is extremely complicated, basically as complicated as the data itself, then that data is actually lawless. It's random.
That randomness is its nature. It can't be compressed into a simpler rule.
Exactly. And that's the core idea behind modern algorithmic information content.
Right. Let's define that clearly for listeners. How does AIT quantify complexity?
It asks a very specific question. What is the absolute minimum size measured in bits, the fundamental units of information of a computer program that is needed to generate a particular piece of data?
Yeah, give us some examples.
Think about a really simple sequence like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, up to 1,000,000. How complex is that sequence?
Not very complex. The rule is super simple.
Right. The program to generate it is tiny. It's basically start at 1, add 1, print, repeat 1,000,000 times. Very short program, therefore very low algorithmic information content. The sequence is highly compressible.
What about something like pi? The digits of pi look random.
They look random, but mathematically, pi also has very little algorithmic information content. Why? Because there's a relatively short, elegant algorithm, a program that can compute the digits of pi accurately forever to any precision you want.
So even though the digits seem chaotic, there's a simple underlying process generating them. Highly compressible again.
Correct. These are examples of patterns of order that can be compressed. Now contrast that with, say, a million-digit number generated by flipping a perfectly fair coin a million times. Heads is 1, tails is 0.
Okay, pure randomness.
Pure randomness. According to AIT, that sequence is irreducible. It's algorithmically random. Why?
Because there's no pattern, no simpler rule to generate it.
Precisely. The shortest possible computer program that can output that exact sequence of a million random digits will be, well, about a million digits long itself.
The program basically just has to say, print out this specific million-digit sequence, 101, 101, 100.
Exactly. It has to contain the entire sequence within itself. It's incompressible by definition. It has maximal algorithmic complexity for its size.
Okay, I think I get the concept. How does this relate back to science or even the financial planning we talked about?
This gives us what the source calls the software view of science. Think about it. What is a successful scientific theory, or even a successful personal life plan, like a budget?
It's a way of making sense of things, finding a pattern.
Yes. It's essentially an act of compression. You take a vast amount of messy experimental data, or the chaos of life's events, and you find a simpler model, a shorter description, a law, an equation, a budget rule that explains or predicts it.
So Occam's razor, the idea that we should prefer the simpler explanation isn't just about elegance.
It's about compressibility. The smallest program, the simplest theory that successfully calculates or predicts the observations is the best theory. In this view, comprehension is compression.
And if you can't find a short program, if the data resists compression,
then you've encountered true inherent complexity, randomness, something irreducible. And this whole idea directly challenges another one of Leibniz's core beliefs.
Which one?
His famous principle of sufficient reason.
The idea that everything must happen for a reason. That every truth must have a logical explanation for why it's true and not otherwise.
Exactly that. Mathematicians especially have traditionally lived by this. They demand rigorous proof, a chain of logical deduction from axioms to theorem. Every QED needs a why.
But AIT suggests some things might just be, without a compressible reason.
That's where it leads. And the ultimate proof of this, the number that embodies this limit, is a fascinating mathematical object called omega.
Omega. This sounds important. Its existence relies on Alan Turing's work, right?
Yes, specifically on Turing's famous halting problem, which he formulated back in 1936, even before modern computers really existed in hardware.
What was the halting problem?
Turing asked what seems like a practical question. Can we write a general-purpose algorithm, a single computer program, that can look at any other computer program along with its input and tell us for sure whether that other program will eventually stop running halt or if it will get stuck in an infinite loop and run forever?
Okay, that seems useful. Like a debugging tool. Could we build that?
Turing proved mathematically that no such general algorithm can possibly exist.
Yep.
It's fundamentally undecidable.
Why not? Why can't we just, run the program and see if it stops?
Because if the program hasn't stopped after, say, a day or a year or a billion years, you still don't know for sure. Is it stuck in an infinite loop? Or does it just need one more microsecond to finish its calculation?
You can never be certain if it's looping or just taking a really, really long time.
Exactly. To solve the halting problem definitively, your master algorithm would need some magical way to predict the future behavior of every conceivable program without actually running them to completion indefinitely. And Turing showed, through a brilliant logical argument similar in spirit to Gödel's, that assuming such an algorithm exists leads to a contradiction.
So the halting problem is unsolvable, undecidable. How does that lead to omega?
Omega, defined by Gregory Chaitin, who developed AIT, is constructed directly from the halting problem. Omega is defined as the probability that a randomly generated computer program will eventually halt.
Randomly generated. How do you do that?
Imagine you're building a program bit by bit, zeros and ones, by flipping a fair coin for each bit. Omega is the probability that this random string of bits you create happens to form a program that, when run, eventually stops.
So it's a number, a probability between 0 and 1.
Precisely. It's a specific, definite, real number. Maybe it's 0.1110, 100, 000 in binary, or some decimal value. It's greater than 0, since some programs definitely halt, and less than 1, since some definitely loop forever.
Okay, it's a specific number. Can we calculate it?
That's the crux. We can approximate it, we can run lots of programs for a while and see which ones halt, and that gives us the first few digits, but we can never calculate omega in its entirety with infinite precision using a finite algorithm. It's uncomputable.
Why is it uncomputable?
Because of its connection to the halting problem. Each program p that halts contributes a value of 1 divided by 2 to the power of the length of p in bits to the sum that defines omega. Knowing omega precisely would essentially give you a way to solve the halting problem, which we know is impossible.
Oh, okay. Still wrapping my head around that. But what's the big implication?
The big implication, the devastating part for Hilbert's dream, comes from the bits of omega itself. Consider the binary expansion of omega. 0 point something 0 at 0.
0 point, say, 10111 forever.
Right. Each of those individual bits, whether the 5th bit is a 0 or a 1, whether the millionth bit is a 0 or a 1, represents an irreducible mathematical fact.
Irreducible, meaning?
Meaning each bit is true, but its truth cannot be derived or compressed from simpler mathematical principles using a finite set of axioms. They are, in a sense, random mathematical facts.
How do we know they're irreducible? What's the proof they're incompressible?
The proof circles back powerfully to the halting problem again. Let's say, hypothetically, you could write a relatively short program, maybe just a few hundred lines of code, that could calculate the first, say, n,000 bits of omega perfectly.
Okay, a compression algorithm for omega's bits.
If such a program existed, what would knowing those n,000 bits allow you to do?
Given the link to halting, it would let you know which programs halt.
Exactly. Knowing the first n bits of omega would effectively give you the answer to the halting problem for all computer programs up to n bits in size. You could figure out which ones halt and which ones don't, just by knowing those bits of omega.
Wow. So knowing omega's bits is like having an oracle for the halting problem?
Precisely. But we know from Turing that the halting problem is undecidable by any algorithm significantly shorter than n bits itself. Therefore, any program capable of calculating the first n bits of omega cannot be significantly shorter than n bits.
It has to be roughly as complex as the bits themselves. You can't compress it?
You cannot compress true complexity. The argument is watertight. The algorithmic complexity of omega's bits is maximal. They are incompressible, random.
So what does this mean for mathematics overall if omega contains an infinite stream of these random, irreducible facts?
It means Hilbert's dream is not just unfulfilled, it's impossible. It conclusively proves that a finite theory of everything for mathematics cannot exist. Why? Because any specific theory, any finite set of axioms and rules you choose, will only have a finite amount of complexity, a finite number of bits of information in its description.
Okay.
But the universe of mathematical truths, as revealed by the infinite random bits of omega, contains infinite complexity. A finite theory can never capture infinite complexity. There will always be true facts lying beyond its reach.
This feels like the ultimate collapse of Leibniz's principle of sufficient reason.
It really is. Omega demonstrates that there are mathematical truths, countless facts encoded in its bits that are true for essentially no reason. Or at least no reason that can be deduced logically from simpler principles within a fixed system. They just are. You can't prove them from below. You can only encounter them.
So how should mathematicians deal with this? If you can't prove these facts, what do you do?
This is where the implications become really transformative, potentially controversial for how mathematics is practiced. The source argues that since you cannot prove these irreducible facts from your existing axioms, the only way to incorporate them into your understanding is to, well, essentially treat them as new axioms.
Just assume them, like postulates in geometry.
Kind of, yes. Accept them as fundamental, self-evident mathematical facts, perhaps discovered computationally or by other means, even if they lack a traditional proof from simpler beginnings. Just like physicists accept the fundamental laws of nature they observe empirically, even if they can't prove why those laws are the way they are.
That sounds radical for mathematics. It pushes math toward becoming. What did the source call it? Quasi-empirical.
Quasi-empirical, exactly. It suggests mathematicians might need to adopt some of the pragmatism we see in physics.
How so?
Physicists are generally quite comfortable adding new, empirically verified laws or principles to their frameworks when the old ones fail to explain new observations in a new domain, like quantum mechanics or cosmology. They find a new rule that works, fits the data, and they adopt it as a working axiom.
Whereas mathematicians traditionally demand absolute deductive certainty, right?
Yeah.
No axioms without necessity.
Traditionally, yes, rigorous proof from agreed-upon foundations was the gold standard. But the reality of omega, The reality of inherent randomness and infinite complexity within mathematics itself suggests that pure logic, pure deduction from a fixed set of axioms, is ultimately insufficient to grasp all mathematical truth.
And are we actually seeing this shift happen in practice, this blurring of lines?
The source argues we are. Look at the rise of experimental mathematics. This is where researchers use massive amounts of computer power. They run simulations, check millions or billions of examples of a conjecture.
Like testing Goldbach's conjecture that every even number is the sum of two primes by just checking trillions of numbers.
Exactly. They're not producing a traditional deductive proof. They're gathering overwhelming computational evidence. And while that kind of computer verification might not feel as intellectually satisfying as a short, elegant proof,
it's arguably more convincing than, say, a 500-page proof that only a handful of people might ever check, and which could easily contain a subtle error.
that's the argument. A vast computation is less likely to have a single fatal flaw than a hugely complex human-derived logical argument. It suggests the traditional distinction between the purely deductive mathematician and the empirical physicist is perhaps not as stark as we once thought.
Both fields, it seems, are running up against fundamental complexity that forces them towards observation, whether it's observing the cosmos or observing the output of a giant mathematical computation.
Exactly. So whether we're talking about the societal governance of your personal finances or the abstract truths of the mathematical universe, we eventually hit this unyielding wall. A wall of complexity that simply cannot be fully compressed, predicted, or governed by finite, rational means. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this has been quite a deep dive, connected to seemingly distant limits.
It really has.
We started by looking at the social economy, seeing how the limits of ignorance are defined and really weaponized, how the full burden of managing potentially infinite life complexity gets pushed onto you, the individual citizen consumer.
Yeah, through these mechanisms of corporate governmentalization and responsibilization, you're constantly mandated, urged, nudged to operate your life like a perfectly rational business, to be the entrepreneurial self, always calculating risk, always striving for financial fitness.
It's a demand for constant compression and rationalization of your existence.
It is. And yet, then we turn to the very bedrock of rationality, pure mathematics, and what did we find?
We found omega. We found infinite irreducible complexity baked into the system itself. Proof that some facts are just true. Without a compressible, provable reason, they defy complete theoretical capture.
It creates this really fascinating philosophical tension, doesn't it? Society demands that you, personally, simplify and compress the inherent chaos of your life into these neat, predictable models. The budget, the 5-year plan, the retirement forecast, the short program for a successful life.
But the fundamental nature of reality, as confirmed by mathematics itself with omega, is that randomness, irreducibility, the unprovable fact, the unexpected event, that stuff is infinite. It's always out there.
So it leads to a final thought, a provocative question for you, the listener, to maybe carry forward from this deep dive.
You're constantly encouraged, maybe even pressured, to compress and simplify your life into these rational, calculable models. Budget, plan, save, optimize. But what if accepting the irreducible, unprovable complexity in your own life, in your own decisions, is just as crucial as mastering the parts you can calculate?
Think about it. If the mathematical universe itself requires us to sometimes accept unprovable facts as new axioms, simply because they appear to be true and are necessary to move forward, maybe we should apply a similar logic to our own personal complexity.
What would that look like?
Maybe it means consciously introducing our own axioms into our personal financial conduct, beliefs about our core values, our life goals, things that we hold to be true for ourselves, even if we can't perfectly justify them with a spreadsheet or prove their rationality to an outside observer.
Unprovable personal beliefs as anchors in the complexity.
Perhaps. These personal axioms, these fundamental values you simply take as given for your life, might be the only way to effectively navigate the truly complex life events, the irreducible uncertainties that no corporate calculator, no financial fitness app, no general societal norm can ever fully forecast or manage for you.
Something definitely to ponder as you manage your own irreducible complexities this week. Until next time on The Deep Dive.
Keep digging deeper.